Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. Today's episode is number 268 here on Thursday, September 10th. I appreciate you guys listening in today. Hopefully you're having yourselves a great week back at it here after a nice Labor Day weekend. I know I talked to you guys on Monday, played a couple of rounds of golf. Things went well. Now we're back at it. We're back to work. Or maybe you're back to school. Maybe you're listening to this out there. You're back on your college campus, trying to attend classes in person, or whether you're all online. I know some campuses are different than others. Or if you're at the high school level, if you're back on campus, in school, in class, or learning online, playing football, it just, if you're listening to this on September 10th here, the date it's released, tonight's the first NFL game. We got the Chiefs and the Texans going at it tonight. This upcoming weekend's the first full weekend of college football and NFL football, and that means only one thing. That means that baseball is coming down the stretch. And ladies and gentlemen, it's happened so quickly. Let's go back to March, however many weeks ago. What is that, 12 weeks now? Potentially we've been in lockdown. I joined you guys here in, the community of GSMC a few weeks before that. So it's been, 25, 26 episodes with you guys thus far, twice a week. And now we're 2-3 weeks away from the end of the regular season. We're under 20 games for most teams. Now, some teams obviously have games to make up, and case in point is the Phillies-Marlins 7-game series in 5 days that will be taking place here Thursday through Monday, I believe it is, and that will go a long way in determining ultimately who will be second place in the National League East, or if one team gets hot, goes 6-1, potentially first place in the National League East, with both teams only being a game or two behind the Atlanta Braves in the the loss column up until this point, because they have to make the games up, and if they win them all, they'll be right there in first place. But before we get into all that stuff, all the nitty-gritty within, the National League wild card race, I'm going to break down who I think is ultimately in the lead. Then we're going to look at some injuries, news, notes, things along those lines, and then wrap things up like we do every Thursday, talking about MVP odds, Cy Young odds, and if there's any value bets to partner with one of our gambling partners out there to win some cash. But ultimately here in the first segment, what I wanted to do, I know the last two episodes I've been discussing previous Hall of Famers who had recently passed away. Well, I wanted to discuss another Hall of Famer, and that is Roberto Clemente, because Wednesday was Roberto Clemente Day across Major League Baseball for, I believe it was the 19th year that they are celebrating Roberto Clemente across Major League Baseball in a very similar fashion, such as Jackie Robinson. And a brief background on Roberto Clemente, just kind of a snapshot, and then we'll dive into kind of some of his individual statistics and look more into his career. But he made his Major League debut in 1955 for the Pirates. He was going against the Dodgers, and the irony there is, after I did a little bit of research, I found out that Roberto Clemente was actually a Rule 5 draft pick for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And for those of you listening out there who aren't familiar with the Rule 5 draft, it essentially means that when a team takes you and you are not on the 40-man Major League roster after 5 years in the minor league system, another team essentially has the opportunity to take you from that system and basically give you a shot in their major league team. I mean, think about it for people who are behind Derek Jeter, who are going to be the shortstop for 10, 15 years, whoever it is. I mean, think about any player from your favorite team at your favorite time, and then think about that person's backup who is in AAA, who's never going to get a chance to start year after year. And after 5 years, basically the agreement gives another team to say, hey, he may not be good enough to make your squad, but he's certainly good enough to make ours, so we're going to give him an opportunity. And Roberto obviously took advantage of that with a Hall of Fame career, as we're all aware. He played over 18 seasons. He turned into, he started out as kind of just a solid baseball player, but obviously turned into a bona fide superstar. He was a gap-to-gap hitter. His career average of .317. He had a slash line of .317, .359, .475, while reaching exactly 3,000 hits. I thought that to be, kind of amazing that he finished exactly on that number, because everybody knows the tragic way that Roberto Clemente died. And I know I'm jumping around his story here, but again, the reason he ended on 3,000 hits was because after the 1972 season, he died in a plane crash on December 31st at the age of 38, while on his way to deliver humanitarian aid to earthquake victims in Nicaragua. So obviously Roberto, going back to Nicaragua to help out those individuals, tragically dies in a plane crash, finishes right on 3,000 hits. He only struck out 1,230 times. So 3,000 hits and only 1,200 strikeouts. Pretty impressive. And now one thing, again, after watching highlights, reading testimonials from people, is that Roberto didn't steal a lot of bases, but the guy was certainly gifted with speed. And his career high in stolen bases was 12 in 1963. But he also had a career high in doubles and triples, and a lot of double-digit triple years. He finished with 166 total triples. Let's see here. There was 9 different years out of 18. So half of his years, double-digit triples, which is certainly fascinating. And I don't have the statistic right in front of me. And of course, a lot of the statistics that we reference nowadays in Major League Baseball weren't as available or weren't used back during that time. So they tried to take today's analytics and apply them to looking at film or gameplay, or I don't even know exactly how they do it. But his defensive metrics graded out extremely well. His base running metrics, getting back to the triples, him taking the extra base when the opportunity presented itself, I believe it was over 50 or 60% of the time. So the guy wasn't a speedster, but he knew how to run the bases, and that led to him taking the extra base and stretching a double into a triple. And 166 of those is very impressive. And when I talked about his defensive metrics as well, he won 12 consecutive Gold Glove awards starting in 1961. So from 1961 all the way till his last year of 1972, he was the Gold Glove winner in right field for the National League. He led the National League in outfield assists 5 times during the course of a career. So the guy had an absolute cannon out in right field. And since 1904, he ranked second in career assists as a right fielder. He has a career 255 assists from right field, which is second all time. So this guy he did it all. I mean, he hit .317, he hit triples. Let's look at his home run stats. He figured out how to hit home runs later in his career. An easy way to put it is that guys who get to the major leagues first, you learn how to hit major league pitching, and then you learn how to hit home runs against major league pitching. Case in point locally here is Alec Baum for the Philadelphia Phillies, former 3rd overall pick, who has come up, hit right around 300, put the ball in play. He's 12 for 23 with runners in scoring position, but certainly hasn't lifted the ball out of the ballpark yet, and that will come with experience. That will come with timing. That will come with repetition, and that's what happened with Roberto Clemente. In his first 5 years, he had 5, 7, 4, 6, 4 home runs, but then from then on, double digits every year and averaged upwards of almost 20 home runs. He started getting to 16, 23, 17, 29 was his career high in 1966 when he won the MVP award. He hit .317 that year, 29 home runs, 119 RBIs. He also had 11 triples and 31 doubles. So what's that math there quickly? 60, 71 extra base hits across the board in 1966. What a fantastic year for Roberto in that year. He was a two-time World Series champion to go along with those 12 consecutive Gold Gloves. He also had 15 All-Stars. He was named an All-Star 15 different times. That's very impressive throughout the course of 18 years. He had 4 NL batting titles to go along with the 1966 award. He hit .351 in 1961, .339 in 1964, .357 in 1967, and .329 in 1965 to win the batting championship in those years. Very impressive. He also ranks, once again, putting the new age sabermetrics into the old style of baseball. He ranks 37th all time in wins above replacement, or WAR, according to Baseball Reference. So very, very high on the list. During his prime, one of the most complete players. I heard Larry Boa speak the other day, and somebody asked him about the best baseball player he's ever played against, and he said it was hands down Roberto Clemente. Nobody was even close. It's just, I mean, this guy, if you really look at it, from 61 or even 1960 through the end of his career, so those 12 years, he was an all-star every year except for 1968, and the guy hit 291 that year, so certainly had the numbers. He finished in the MVP top 20 every single year. He had, 4 top 5 finishes in MVP voting, and it's just, let's look at some of the individual performances that really stand out here based on some research I've been able to do. But 1956, he had an inside the park walk-off grand slam. And apparently that is the only time in the history of Major League Baseball it actually happened. It was, a historic trip, 9-8 victory, the Pirates over the Cubs. And it was his first home run was also an inside the park home run. So he has the only inside the park walk-off grand slam in the history of baseball. A year later, in 1957, he had a 3-homer, 7 RBI performance, which was probably the most impressive offensive performance of Roberto Clemente's career. 4 for 5, 3 dingers, 7 RBIs against the Reds. He had 2 two-run shots and then a solo homer in the 9th. The Pirates did end up losing that game, but of course Roberto was a star. 1958, he had a 3-time 3-bagger. Clemente became just the 28th player in history to have 3 triples in one game, which ties the modern era. So nobody has had 4 triples in one game, it seems here, but Clemente is one of the gentlemen who was able to have 3 of them in one game. He had a walk-off hit in the All-Star game in 1961 to lead the National League to a 5-4 victory. He Hank Aaron led off the inning. Frank Robinson was there, so a stacked lineup. But ultimately, your hero was Roberto Clemente. In the same year that he won the MVP, he also had the walk-off winner in the All-Star game. That's a pretty good summer if you're Roberto Clemente. Defensively, in 1969, he made a crazy catch to preserve a no-hitter. One-handed grab over the right field fence. It's one of the best highlights and best catches that you'll see if you search over YouTube and kind of dive into some of these. You'll be able to find that one. In 1970, Roberto Clemente night at Three Rivers Stadium. They had this. They welcomed fans from Puerto Rico for the occasion. Obviously, Roberto was a hero for a lot of kids of Latino descent because Roberto Clemente, after his passing in 1972, was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1973, and he was the first Latino to be enshrined in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. So everything that Jackie Robinson did for the African American community, Roberto Clemente was a very similar idolized player for the Latino community. I know Alex Rodriguez has talked about idolizing Roberto Clemente, and that's where I think baseball is doing a nice job in honoring him similar to Jackie Robinson, because the game has continued to evolve, and obviously the influence of Latino players in Puerto Rico and everybody has continued to grow across Major League Baseball, and we've seen that with everybody from Puerto Rico wearing number 21 in honor of Roberto Clemente on Wednesday, with the rest of Major League Baseball wearing a patch and showing their love for Roberto Clemente. Also, Major League Baseball, the MLB network, has a Studio 21 along with a Studio 42. So very much highly thought of in regards to Major League Baseball, and just fascinating. I mean, the guy was an all-star, Gold Glove, top 15 MVP guy. He hit .312 with 7 home runs and 60 RBIs. So yeah, or 10 home runs and 60 RBIs. So maybe the offensive power numbers were dropping at the age of 37 for the Pirates, but the guy could still hit. Career .317 hitter, 1,300 RBIs, 240 home runs, and exactly 3,000 hits. And of course, a hero to the Latino community, and just a model citizen for everything Major League Baseball, and a great athlete and a great baseball player. But that'll wrap things up here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll pause right now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we'll dive into some news and notes, jump around the league, keep you guys up to date on everything Major League Baseball. So stick around, everybody. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back, everybody, to today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is episode number 268. If you guys haven't done so yet, check us out on social media. Head to Facebook, head to Twitter, check out the GSMC Baseball Podcast, as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. They're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, across the board. Baseball is not the only podcast within the network. Actually, there's upwards of 30, even more than that. It's anything you would like. I mean, if you can come up with a topic, there's a podcast for you, whether it's books, music, television, movies, other sports, music. Did I say that already? I don't even remember. There's so many podcasts that if you can't find one that's entertaining, there's something wrong with you. That's all I'm going to say. But check that out. Go into the search bar wherever you're listening to this podcast. Type in GSMC, and the library will pop up, and you'll have a lot of great content from a lot of my coworkers within the podcast network. So we certainly appreciate it. But diving in now to kind of the news and notes segment of the baseball podcast here today. A couple of different things I wanted to touch on. First of all is the news that Major League Baseball has released the quote-unquote film room, which is millions of old video clips, every pitch from Major League Baseball over the last 3 years, as well as highlights dating back all the way to 1929. And you, as the consumer, are able to put together a package of up to, I believe it is 4 different highlights, and you can share those across any social media platform. So baseball is starting to finally hear the feedback and starting to understand the power of social media and the ability that this has to grow the audience and sway members to become bigger fans, because before they used to crack down on this all the time. If you had any sort of video online, they would shut it down. They would come at you. Even Pitching Ninja on Twitter had to go to battle, and he's basically just like, guys, I'm trying to champion your product and show how difficult it is and how good these guys are at what they do, and you're shutting me down for it. I'm trying to partner with you while asking nothing in return but spread the word of your product. And Now, I do think that this film room is a little bit internally focused still. I understand the benefit of being able to put together these highlights. You can't manipulate the system as much as I would like. I know I still have to continue to dive around and learn more about it as I'm diving through highlights content, learning how to clip things back and forth, shorten the clips, edit the clips, be able to rotate them, do certain things, edit the videos, filters, text, things along those different lines that are what make other social media platforms, stand out amongst the crowd of many. So if Major League Baseball can partner with some of these platforms, I think this will continue to benefit it as well. But it is certainly a great step in the right direction. I mean, I've come on here a couple of times and talked about how baseball needs to partner with online media and be more willing to understand that world and utilize it to be successful. And this is a good first step. I think this is, kind of a lowering of the curtain, so to speak, that will allow this to evolve, because I do think baseball will find success, and I do think the reaction will be positive. I don't know how many people will be sharing all of these highlights or be watching old videos, but I'll certainly find it entertaining. Or if you're having a conversation with your friends or your family over a couple of drinks, you're outside, it's now fall time over the weekend, and you want to watch an old highlight of Willie Mays or Roberto Clemente, who we talked about in that first segment, Jackie Robinson, some of these guys who paved the way for today's baseball players, and now you can do that. Now you don't have to rely on YouTube and a lot of older video. I mean, like I said, going all the way back to 1929, that's a long time ago. That's 90 years of highlights that are now available in this film room. And if you really want to take some time and go down a rabbit hole, which I would suggest, because it is fun and they do have a lot of video that I've never seen before. And if you want to put together videos of triple plays or videos of the final out of the World Series or videos of complete game, no hitters, the final pitch, the final out of those types of instances, guys who have hit 4 home runs in a game and kind of put those all together in a clip and then share them online, you can do that. But the length of video does become a bit longer for some of the newer niche social media platforms that are come and go, a lot of high turnover, 15-second videos, things along those lines. But again, good first step for Major League Baseball. Certainly an improvement on what they've been doing. I can't fault them for that. Allowing any sort of video moving forward is certainly an upgrade over what things have been in the past. But check that out, MLB Film Room. Just type it into Google. You got to sign up with an email. Of course, they want to, email you to try to get you to buy something later. But as of now, the film room is free, and you should check it out if you're listening out there. But this week we also had, let's see here, I'm trying to remember which exact day it was. Was it today's Thursday, Tuesday, I think it was, on the 8th? We had the third longest at-bat in the history of Major League Baseball. It was between Cardinals catcher Matt Wieters and Minnesota Twins left-handed pitcher Caleb Thibar. I think that's how you say it. So, 19-pitch battle. It was pretty impressive to watch. Wieters had fouled off 14 pitches during the 19-pitch performance before Thielbar got him to fly out to the center field warning track, and the bases were loaded at this point. So Thielbar was able to get out of the jam, and the Cardinals were up 5-2 in that inning. Pitches 10 through 15 were all fastballs that Wieters was able to foul off into empty Busch Stadium. Number 16 was a high slider, and then 17, 18, 19 back to fastballs after that. But Thielbar threw 10 consecutive 3-2 pitches into the strike zone. That's very impressive. I mean, those are high leverage, high pressure pitches, because you certainly don't want to walk in a run in this instance in the bottom of the third, already down 5-2 in this game. You don't want to give up anymore. So that's a fascinating stat there, being able to locate, whether it's control or command, 10 pitches in the zone in a row is a very impressive feat. And looking at a tweet here from Sarah Langs, she says, Matt Wieters saw 19 pitches in his last plate appearance. There have been 5,400 instances this season of a player having at least 4 plate appearances in a game and seeing fewer pitches than that. So a player total during the game seeing less than 19 pitches has happened over 500 or 5,400 times and Wieters did it in one plate appearance. So that got me thinking, what was my longest plate appearance in regards to a pitch count? And I got to be honest with you, right? So even if you run the count full, you foul off one, maybe two pitches, you're looking at a 7-pitch at bat. That's not out of the ordinary. A lot of players or a lot of guys will do that if you play long enough. If you play travel ball all across the country, games in the summer, the fall, the spring, all of the above, you're going to have 7, 8, 9 pitch at bats. But typically when you hit double digits, you get to 11, 12, that's when things in the dugout start to pick up once again. People start to get excited. There's a line there where it's like, come on, guy, just put the ball in play. Let's get this going. What are we doing here? Just square it up, either strike out or throw it in play. And then you get to pitch 13, 14, 15, and all of a sudden you find yourself on the other side going, hey, you know what? Let's see how long this can go. Let's see this guy keep throwing it in the zone. Let's see you keep spoiling good pitches. And ultimately, let's see how this turns out. So I think my longest at-bat was probably 12 or 13 pitches. If I have to remember, it was down in Texas one summer. I think we were in Louisiana actually playing the Aces, who was out of Louisiana in the Texas League, and it had a 12, 13 pitch at-bat. Ultimately, I think I flew out to right field. Same thing. The kid just kept pounding the zone. I fouling off breaking balls, and I kept chasing everything that wasn't in the zone because ultimately I didn't want to get called out on a close called third strike after pitch number 12 because I wanted a walk. I was essentially up there to put the ball in play, and if it fell in, it fell in. But ultimately, I couldn't even imagine getting to 19 pitches. And the record here we have, let's see if I can pull it up. Yes, it's Giants' Brandon Belt had a 21-pitch at-bat against Angels pitcher Jamie Barria in 2018. He had 21 pitches, and it lasted 13 minutes. It was the most on record for a plate appearance since they started keeping pitch counts for specific plate appearances. Kind of fascinating. So, oh man, shout out to Thibaut winning the battle after 19 pitches, but I just thought that was fascinating and wanted to bring that up here. Another headline that's recently come out is Justin Timberlake. That's right, JT, my man, the entertainer. He is investing in the effort to bring a Major League Baseball team to Nashville, Tennessee. Timberlake says, quote, I am thrilled to be involved in the movement to bring Major League Baseball to the great state of Tennessee. So basically what I just said, Timberlake is somebody that's world known, huge in the area, in the region, and in the state. He supports baseball and all other things. There's a handful of investors trying to get a team to Nashville, Tennessee. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to happen in 2021 or even 2022, but I do think it's in that conversation of happening soon after, depending on if they're able to get enough funding to build a stadium. Where are they going to put it in regards to the city? Is it going to be close to the Titans stadium? Are they going to do kind of one area of professional sports? That's what Philadelphia does. They have the basketball and hockey arena right next to the baseball and football stadiums. They all share kind of one huge extended parking lot. So no matter the event that's taking place, there's always enough parking. There's always enough tailgating. It's pretty well done. So they need to figure all of that stuff out in Tennessee and in Nashville. And ultimately, if they're going to make a move, but having the name and having the image of Justin Timberlake behind you as you're starting to try to implement baseball is certainly one that I think would benefit you. I mean, myself as a 31-year-old millennial, I've grown up with JT from his days back in NSYNC till now as a movie star, all the way back to music here. Having him invest in baseball makes a ton of sense. It's a great investment. We've seen Patrick Mahomes do it here recently. So JT from Memphis, from Tennessee, going home. I like it. I'm all for it. I think a major league team in Nashville would be a good thing for Major League Baseball. It would certainly be a destination I would love to travel to, even if the locals aren't filling out the stadium day in and day out. It would be a destination travel trip for the rest of the teams, that's for sure, and their fan bases. But wrapping up here this second segment, I just want to dive through the injuries that are taking place across Major League Baseball. I'm sure I'm going to miss one or two here, but keeping you guys updated. Justin Turner of the Dodgers, he could return from the injured list by this weekend. That's what Dave Roberts told us the other day. He's been out since August 29th with a hamstring strain, but they're hoping to get him back into the lineup sooner than later. You got Robert Gesselman for the Mets. Multiple times he walked off the field Tuesday night. He had to bend over because he wasn't hurt. A day later, testing revealed a fractured rib, which ended his season. So the injuries continue for New York, and Gesselman has a fractured rib, which led to all that pain that we were watching him go through the other night. The Blue Jays are trying to get everybody back, as well as losing some more people to the injured list. I mean, the names of Bo Bichette, Ken Giles, Nate Pearson, Matt Shoemaker, Jordan Romano are all going to be coming off or on the injured list here shortly. They placed Rowdy Tellez on the 10-day injured list with a right knee strain, but Bo Bichette came off the IL and played 6 innings the other day this week, so he'll be back. Ken Giles is close to returning. They expect him, early next week, if not this weekend. Pearson is starting to ramp up his rehab from right elbow tightness. Shoemaker's starting to ramp up and play catch and long toss. Romano, he's the only one that doesn't have a timetable yet. So it looks like Giles is the closest, followed by Pearson, with Romano being the last one to come back from the injured list up there in Toronto. Eric Hosmer and Tommy Pham of the Padres. Hosmer was removed on Monday after he was hit from a fastball in the hand. He suffered a left index finger fracture, broken left index finger. Hosmer's on the 10-day IL and could miss anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, as the range is very wide there, because this looks like it's going to be, or sounds like it's going to be, a pain management issue for Eric Hosmer out there in San Diego. Tommy Pham, meanwhile, he's making great progress trying to return from a surgery to repair a broken bone in his left hand. He found himself taking batting practice for the first time Wednesday. Could be back in the lineup here shortly. Then you have Matt Chapman, Marcus Semien for the Athletics. Chapman was held out of any throwing or hitting on Tuesday as he's dealing with right hip tendonitis. They're debating whether or not to put him on the IL or whether, he's going to be able to bounce back in quicker than 10 days. Still a wait and see when it comes to Chapman. But they got Semien back on Tuesday's doubleheader. So he came off the injured list, or he had missed the last 5 games due to a left side soreness. Looks like he never made it to the injured list, but missed almost a week of games, and he's returned out there for the Athletics. In regards to the Braves, you have Max Fried and Cole Hamels. Instead of giving Fried an extra day of rest, they threw him on the 10-day injured list. They basically said, hey, instead of giving an extra day or two, we're just going to skip a start or two. I know you have muscle spasms, so we're going to move on, and we're just going to skip a start, and hopefully you'll be much better when you bounce back for that. Jose Altuve for the Astros, he's on the injured list with a right knee sprain. He took a major step forward returning when he ran sprints and bases this past week. Looks like he could come off the list as early as Sunday night's game against the Dodgers. He's going to want to play on national television. But that'll wrap things up for the second segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We'll pause right now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. But when we come back, I'm going to break down this National League wildcard race. I'm going to talk about the American League briefly, but we're going to get into the National League in much more detail. So stick around, everybody. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, everybody, to the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is episode number 268. Thanks for listening, everybody. Here in the third segment, we're going to talk about both wild card races. We're going to dive into a little bit more detail. I know for Monday's episode, we talk across all the standings, discuss the division leaders, where the playoffs are at, but I wanted to dive in a bit more as we're under the 3-week mark here until the playoffs start into these wild card races. And the reason I said that at the end of segment number 2 there was because the American League wild card and the American League playoff teams, I still think are very much set in stone. And the reason I say that, because even though the Yankees have been in an absolute free fall and haven't been able to figure things out now for a couple of weeks here, they did win tonight on Wednesday night. I'm recording this late here Wednesday, so they are 22-21 currently in the 8th spot in the American League for the playoffs. However, the only teams that they're basically fighting against for this position, there's 3 of them really, and none of them are any good. I mean, none of them were anywhere close to playoff conversation at the beginning of the year, and that's the Baltimore Orioles at 20-22, the Detroit Tigers at 19-22, and the Seattle Mariners at 19-23. And basically, we're looking at the Yankees compared to the Orioles, Tigers, and Mariners in regards to a potential playoff spot. There shouldn't even be much of a conversation here. And the numbers on ESPN, as I'm looking here on the standings, as the playoff prediction percentage is over on the right-hand side, they have the Yankees still at an 89.3% chance to make the postseason. So we know who the 8 teams are going to be. We said that for 2 weeks now. You got the Rays, Jays, and Yankees coming out of the American League East. The White Sox, Indians, and Twins out of the Central. And your 2 teams out of the West are the Athletics and the Astros. Now, there is going to be some jockeying for position, even through the 4 through 6 slots. The Blue Jays continue to play good baseball, but that Indians, Twins, White Sox race is going to be key down the stretch because the team who wins the Central could be the 2, the next one could be the 4, and then the last one could be the 6. So it doesn't look like they're going to line up to play against each other, but they could basically be taking on everybody else in the American League, and we could see that Central Division really establish themselves. So as much as New York continues to struggle here, as much as everybody's talking about Boone trying to figure things out, Voigt's had some struggles recently. They were winning the other day 6-2 and lost the game. They had lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight before their win against the Blue Jays tonight, and 8 out of 9, and they're still a 90% chance to make the postseason. So if you're a Yankees fan, just exhale knowing that you got to get through the next 2 to 3 weeks. You're still looking at a matchup-based conversation when it comes to that first round best of 3. You got to get your pitching right, but Garrett Cole going twice in a 5-game series, even if you do end up the 8 seed, ultimately playing those Tampa Bay Rays as the 1 seed, you got to feel good about Cole possibly winning 2 games and only having to steal 1 out of the other 3 with the rest of your rotation. So what I wanted to do much more in this segment is discuss the National League, because there are a ton of teams in the conversation around the National League playoff spot. And specifically the wild card. I mean, some of these teams we discussed could be the 2nd seed, could be out of the playoffs, could even win their division still. I mean, the National League West is really the only division that's out of reach right now, and that's with the LA Dodgers at 31-12. Everybody knows them being one of the top teams in baseball, but let's kind of start from the top down. I mean, let's touch on those Philadelphia Phillies right off the top, based on their current playoff odds here of 89.5%. They are 4th in the majors in runs per game, only behind the Dodgers, Padres, and Braves. Harper, Realmuto, Hoskins continue to, push the offense. Zach Wheeler has obviously been an overachiever for them this year, 4-0, 2.47 ERA. His strikeouts are down, but his double play balls are up, so it really hasn't been status quo for the rest of his career, but certainly has been effective. The main weakness, however, for the Phillies is that bullpen. They still lead the majors, or I guess are last in the majors, however you want to look at it, with with a 7.02 ERA, even though they made a ton of trades at the deadline. I mean, they added Brandon Workman, who's been solid as closer, but a lot of the other guys they added haven't been as successful. So it's going to be a tough stretch for them here in September with 7 games in 5 days coming up against the Marlins. I mentioned that briefly earlier in the episode, but that's going to go a long way to determining both the Marlins and the Phillies' outcome in regards to whether or not they make the postseason. But the Phillies, their odds are pretty good right now at 21-18 based on where the National League is and based on where the NL East is to get into the playoffs. Next up in the highest odds here as potentially making it that could still fall out is the St. Louis Cardinals. They're currently at an 80% chance to make the playoffs at 18-17. They're led by their rotation, which has the 5th best ERA in all of baseball. It's allowing the lowest batting average as well as the 3rd lowest WOBA in Major League Baseball. They've had Brad Miller overachieve for them offensively. He's taken over the DH duties, the ex-Philly, hitting .282 with 17 walks and 22 strikeouts, so he's been very effective offensively for them. But their weakness overall is that offense. Outside of Brad Miller, Paul Goldschmidt, it's been a disappointment thus far. I mean, Matt Carpenter, Tyler O'Neill, Dylan Carlson, Lane Thomas, they're all hitting under 200. They haven't put it together at all. So is the offense good enough to meet up with this rotation and ultimately get this team to the playoffs? They do have a 5-game set coming up with Milwaukee in September. A couple of double headers in a single game. Those are makeup games and certainly go a long way interdivisionally into who will make the postseason. But I know it's going to be tough with all the double headers that's going on. But the Cardinals don't play another series against a team that's above 500 after the Twins games this week coming up here. They got the Tigers, Reds, Brewers, Pirates, Royals, Brewers. So the schedule certainly favors the St. Louis Cardinals, and that's where the conversation then becomes the 4-5 matchup, because the San Diego Padres are pretty much entrenched in that 4 slot, so it comes down to the 2nd in the NL East or 2nd in the NL Central, and who has that better record, and who will match up with the Padres in the first round, as opposed to being that, that 6th seed going against that 3rd division winner that's potentially the Cubs or the Braves. So pick your poison there, whether it's the Padres, Cubs, or Braves, but it's certainly a matchup game that will be interesting to see as we continue to move down the stretch. After the Cardinals here, next up on the list of potential playoff percentage is the San Francisco Giants. Fascinating. They're at 67.3%. Obviously, Mike Yastrzemski has been one of the best players. He's pushed Fernando Tatis Jr. and Mookie Betts when it comes to WAR and as well as MVP conversation. Let's see here. Brandon Belt has hit .337 for them. Donovan Solano has hit .353. So those 3 guys at the top of the lineup have been overachieving and really carrying this team because the bullpen has not been great. Closer Trevor Gott and fellow reliever Tyler Rogers are a combined 2-5 with a 7.44 ERA. A couple of starters have struggled for him. Johnny Cueto, Kevin Gausman, Trevor Cahill. They got to continue to push and get things rolling. Their big series down the stretch comes in the middle of September here over the next couple of days against the San Diego Padres. They also finished with 3 games against the Padres. So 6 against the Padres over the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks could go a long way into determining their standing, because it does look like LA 1, San Diego 2. So the best would be NL West 3rd slot. And you're looking at that wild card seed of number 7 or number 8 in a matchup against the top team in the National League. Following the Giants here, we have the Miami Marlins. They currently own a 45% chance to make the postseason. They are 19-18 as of time of recording. The Atlanta Braves are hammering the Marlins. They've scored 25 runs right now at the point here where we're at in today's show. So they'll be 19-19. But at 500, they're right in the conversation for that 8th spot in the playoffs, and they would be the 8th playoff team if the playoffs started today. And they're led by their starting pitching, 3.94 ERA. Rookie starter Sixto Sanchez as well as Trevor Rogers have been super impressive. They've combined for a 2.25 ERA through 7 starts. Will they be able to keep it going? I think so. Sixto is one of the most impressive prospects that has come up in Major League Baseball in a long, long time. I mean, he was a Phillies farm system guy. They traded him for JT Realmuto. I was a huge Sixto Sanchez fan. I went to go watch him pitch in Lakewood in high A ball. I was looking forward to go watching him pitch in Double A in Reading, Pennsylvania. And then they ship him out ultimately to get JT, who's one of the best catchers, or the best catcher in baseball right now. So I don't regret the move for them, but it is certainly frustrating watching Pitching Ninja and watching highlights of Sixto Sanchez just making Major League hitters look foolish at such a young age and throwing 100 miles an hour. But he's going to be tough to deal with over the next decade for anybody in Major League Baseball, and he's certainly impressive from the right side. Offensively, the Marlins aren't very good. They don't hit much. They're 23rd in runs per game. Let's see. Corey Dickerson has 6 home runs, but he's hitting just .332. They did add Starling Marte, who should help the offense and should help the outfield positions. Of course, their big series is that same one with the Philadelphia Phillies we spoke about. And they're fun to watch. I mean, I've had a great time watching Miami play, watching Sixto Sanchez throw, watching a lot of these guys, trying to make a move here. It's been fun to watch. So, after Miami, next up is Milwaukee. They currently, let's see here, have a 43% chance to make the postseason. They find themselves at 19-22. Their bullpen is their strength. It has the 13th best ERA in the majors, but the 6th win probability added. So they've been great when games are close and have given up runs when things have been much more apart. But their offense is just, it's not good. They're hitting .221. None of their 8 regulars are hitting over .250 as of Tuesday. So you would just think, Christian Yelich, he's hitting .213. Yeah, he's got 9 home runs, but the guy's an MVP, last year, the year before, and now he's hitting .213. So it's been a struggle for them down the stretch. So that 5-game series with St. Louis looms large, of course, but certainly they're on the outside looking in Milwaukee. Next up, we got the New York Mets. They currently have a 30% chance to make the postseason. They are, 20-24. Jacob deGrom obviously remains the best pitcher in baseball. He's got a 1.69 ERA, but they've only won 3 of his 8 starts this year. They haven't been able to parlay that effectiveness on the mound into the win column. And that's frustrating for all Mets fans because that's really the only game you can put count on a W in the 5 days, because outside of deGrom, the rest of the rotation is 6-12 with a 6.64 ERA. So you got the best pitcher in baseball and then nobody else helping them out. And that's where, it starts and stops with the Mets, is that starting rotation. Of course, they got series with the Phillies coming up, series with the Marlins coming up, but they've struggled against both of those teams year to date. And unless they turn things around and unless that starting pitching starts to be more effective, they're looking at finishing under 500 and being home come playoff time. And now the last 2 teams are 3 teams here that are absolutely huge long shots, but we'll talk about them briefly. The Colorado Rockies at 20-22. They only have a 25% chance of making the playoffs just due to the schedule down the stretch. Of course, they're going to be facing off against the Dodgers, but also the Giants. They're going to need to beat up on those other teams in the division, the Giants and the Diamondbacks specifically through the stretch here. So the Rockies are 9-19 since an 11-3 start. We knew they started hot, but ultimately were unable to continue that moving forward. And their hitting away from Coors Field is a corporate because they're hitting just .223 on the road. So it's worse than normal. They hit .230 away from Coors Field last year. This year it's all the way down to .223, which is going to put their odds at just about 25%. Next up, we got the Cincinnati Reds. My breakout team in the National League didn't get the memo this summer. They are at a 20% chance to make the postseason at 18-24. Of course, Trevor Bauer at the top of the rotation. Some of the other guys up there, Sonny Gray, have been effective. Jesse Winkler hitting the ball offensively. But just the rest of the offense, they can't get it going. The Reds are 29th in runs per game. They're second in walk rate, but they just go long ball or nothing. They don't hit any singles. They're batting .210 right now with runners in scoring position, so they just can't get the big hit to bring in those runners, and that's what cost them the entire summer. there in Cincinnati. And lastly, let's see, the last team here, you got the Nationals. Do we even talk about them? Because they're at 3%. Juan Soto, Trey Turner continuing to be effective, but everything else going very poorly in Washington. Then you got Pittsburgh and Arizona under 1% to possibly get the wild card position. So if you're looking at it, I mean, your Phillies at 89, the Cardinals at 78, and then that next tier of San Francisco, Milwaukee, and Miami all battling for those 7 and 8 spots in the National League. And I think that's going to be a fun little trip down the stretch here. But that'll wrap things up for the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll pause right now for another word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we're going to dive into the Cy Young, MVP, give you guys the updates on the odds, see if we can find any sort of value or if every one of these races is case closed. Stick around, everybody. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It is Thursday, September 10th. This is episode number 268 of the Baseball Podcast, and we are less than 3 weeks away from the conclusion of the 2020 Major League Baseball season. It is come and gone just like that. We are coming down the stretch, and like I like to do here every Thursday on the Baseball Podcast, I want to dive into the Cy Young MVP award update, see where the odds are, and we have a conversation to have this week. The odds have changed once again, and let's start out with the MVP odds. Let's get right into the fun stuff here in the American League, because this is wide open, and I've talked to you guys every week here. Brandon Lowe was leading it one week when we discussed it for the Rays. Mike Trout was leading it another week for the Angels, of course. And here, as of September 9th, time of recording at night, Shane Bieber has taken the lead in regards to odds to win the American League MVP award. So not only is he your leader, of course, if this is the case, to win the American League Cy Young award, but also the MVP award. He is currently plus 400 to win the MVP odds. Mike Trout is back in second place at plus 550, followed by Jose Abreu plus 650, Nelson Cruz plus 825, and then Brandon Lowe at plus 950. Some of the other guys who have gotten hot but have fallen off now: Anthony Rendon, Luke Voit, Jose Ramirez, Willie Adams, Tim Anderson. All of these guys are on the board and available to bet on. But there really isn't that stud currently in the American League when it comes to offense. I mean, you have guys like Abreu having a great year, but he's a designated hitter. Is he able to win the award without playing defense? Is that a conversation that we need to have offensively? I mean, or you got Nelson Cruz, who's a designated hitter right at the top there. So 2 out of the top 4 are DHs. One of them is a pitcher, and one of them is Mike Trout. So what's the conversation that we're having? Are we giving this to Mike Trout, or are we giving it to a pitcher or a designated hitter? Where are we at with this? And I mean, Nelson Cruz, don't get me wrong, he's hit 342, 15 home runs, 31 RBIs on the year. Mike Trout, 15 home runs, 38 RBIs. His average up to 297. So that's where his odds have started to climb, because I talked to you guys when he was back around like 260 that this isn't up to Mike Trout's standard. So if he gets that number up to 310, 315, I think he could overtake Shane Bieber in the MVP award. After him, you got Hernandez from Toronto, who's recently on the injured list with 14 home runs, hitting .308. Abreu, Jimenez, Olsen. But let's look at Shane Bieber potentially winning the award. Let's look at other pitchers who have won both the Cy Young and the MVP award. And there's been a handful of them over the course of Major League Baseball. And now it hasn't happened since 2014. Clayton Kershaw did it with the LA Dodgers. He went 21-3 with a 1.77 ERA over the course of that year. So, no argument here. He finished ahead, it looks like, of Giancarlo Stanton in 2014. So, Kershaw was the last one to do it almost 6 years ago. Before him, we saw Justin Verlander do it in 2011. He went 24-5 with a 2.40 ERA that year. Very impressive. He got 18 out of 28 first place votes ahead of runner-up Jacoby Ellsbury for the Red Sox that year. But since 2011 and 2014, there's a bit of a gap until it happened before that. It was Dennis Eckersley in 1992, the third most recent pitcher to win the MVP award. He had 51 saves with a 1.91 ERA and only a 3.6% walk rate. So pounded the zone, was right at it, got 15 of 28 first place votes. He edged out Twins' Kirby Puckett that year. So if Kirby got all the other votes, it was 15-13 in favor of Eckersley over Puckett in what was a tight race there in 1992. Roger Clemens did it in 1986. He was 24-4 with a 2.48 ERA. That's kind of when the legend of the Rocket was born at just 23 years old. Struck out 20 Marlins that year. We talked about that on a previous show here a few months ago with the GSMC Baseball Podcast. He got 19 of 28 first place votes. He, runner-up Don Mattingly that year in regards to finishing second. Before Roger Clemens, it was Willie Hernandez for Detroit. In 1984, I don't even know if I've heard the name Willie Hernandez. He had a 1.92 ERA that year with 32 saves. Navigated the Tigers wire to wire to win their World Series. His then MLB record of 32 straight saves without a blown save. That was high praise at the time, but certainly isn't, that impressive anymore. But it was back in 1984. You had Raleigh Fingers do it in 1981. Vita Blue. I always forget which one it is there. In 1971, he did it going 24-8 with a 1.82 ERA. He remains the youngest MVP award ever. He got 14 out of 24 first place votes that year. And then we're all the way back to the 60s, talking Sandy Koufax, Bob Gibson, Duke Nukem, Denny McLain, all of these guys. So we've only seen it twice in the last decade. And 3 times, since 1980-something? So if Shane Bieber is able to pull this off at plus 400, I'd be very surprised. I think the money and the value currently, as awkward as this sounds, and it's usually not the case, but I think the money and the value is at Mike Trout at plus 550. Looking at his stat line of 15 home runs, 38 RBIs, up to 297. I think this is the guy we're looking at who should be the favorite. Now, Bieber, of course, if he finishes with, 3 more starts here that are 7, 8 innings, 0 runs, we're going to have a conversation. But if he goes out even one time, gives up 4, 5, 6 earned runs, I think you're going to look at Mike Trout as jumping these guys, especially because Trout plays defense, so you put him against Abreu, Cruz, he's ahead of Lowe. So it's Mike Trout and Shane Bieber right now for the American League MVP, and I think the value is in Mike Trout. Transitioning now to the National League, looking at the odds here, I think you guys know ultimately who the favorite is on this side, and there really isn't much of a conversation. Fernando Tatis Jr. continues to lead the way. He is at plus 124. And honestly, I still think that may be a good bet. Now, the only thing that could really happen here is potentially Mookie Betts making an absolute run late. Looking at both of their lines, Tatis hitting 303, 15 home runs, 39 RBIs. Mookie Betts has 311, 14 home runs, 33 RBIs. So it's really those two guys and everybody else when it comes to, across the board production offensively. Marcelo Zuna has been good, hitting 306, 13, and 37. But him being the designated hitter doesn't have him in the conversation. So you're looking at Betts, Tatis. Next up, you have Mike Yastrzemski at plus 762. He's been, obviously the stir that spins the drink out there in San Francisco. But he's only got 9 home runs, doesn't have quite the power numbers to have the conversation around MVP. Bryce Harper below him, he's gotten extremely cold. Juan Soto could be a conversation. He's hitting 356, 11 home runs, 27 RBIs. He missed a handful of games, so his numbers may not reach the level of Betts and Tatis, but he's certainly been a video game almost every time he's out there. And him being in the division with the Phillies, I very much enjoy watching Juan Soto hit, and just the passion and energy that he plays the game with is a ton of fun to watch. I mean, I know I could probably get under the skin of some people out there. They hate the antics. They hate the theatrical side of Juan Soto, but I very much enjoy it, and I very much like watching him hit balls 400, 500 feet as well, like we've seen this year. Talking now about the Cy Young Award odds. I mean, there's nobody close in the American League. We said it, Shane Bieber, minus 138. So basically bet 138 to win 100. Your odds are not very good there when it comes to value, but he's the runaway. I mean, even if he has a start where he gives up 4 or 5 or 6 runs like I talked about, he may not win the MVP award, but he's still going to win the Cy Young. That's the difference when it comes to the MVP and the Cy Young, with pitchers potentially winning the award. You're not allowed to have one of those slip-ups, especially when you're in a 60-game season and everything is weighted much more. Behind him, you got Garrett Cole plus 600, Lance Lynn plus 750, Lucas Giolito plus 950. Are the next 3 guys. I mean, ultimately, if we're looking at it here, Garrett Cole's number has continued to rise as he was plus 200 last week. It seems here, or 2 weeks ago, based on the graph. But Bieber's the guy in the American League. It's just a matter of if you want to pony up the odds to win some money at minus 138. Looking now at the National League, the Cy Young odds, we touched about how Yu Darvish's odds have absolutely plummeted. You could have gotten him at plus 500 as little as 2 weeks ago. And it's right now we have him at plus 175. It is a much more crowded field, I will say, in the National League, similar to the wild card opportunity. The depth in the National League and the parity in the National League is much greater. Yu Darvish plus 175. Max Fried not far behind him at plus 225. Then you got Trevor Bauer, Jacob deGrom, Sonny Gray, and Clayton Kershaw all in the next pool there at plus 600. So 4 guys at plus 600, which gives you a top 6 that has been very impressive. And Jacob deGrom, he's been the best pitcher in the National League. The Mets just don't score enough and win enough for him, like we touched on in last segment. They just haven't even won the games where he's been dominant. That would be the only reason I would say that's not the value pick at plus 600. Yu Darvish at plus 175, I still think is good value. If you want to hedge your bets, maybe throw some money on Max Fried at plus 225. One of those 2 guys I think does come away with the award. Trevor Bauer, the Reds team isn't good enough. Sonny Gray, the Reds aren't good enough. The Mets aren't good enough for deGrom, and the Dodgers are almost too good for Kershaw and some of these other starters who are on the list here. So I think Yu Darvish in the Cubs, Max Fried in the Braves, they check all the boxes of outstanding ace-like stuff, outstanding ace-like numbers, and a successful team that's riding your energy or your momentum into the postseason. I think those guys are both good value at plus 175 and plus 225. It would just be a matter of checking out the lineups down the stretch, how many times they're going to start, previous matchups against those lineups, and if you think those guys are going to continue to shove, you could possibly win some cash. Next, we're looking at the AL and NL Rookie of the Year. In the American League, we got a 3-horse race here, really a 2-horse race with kind of a dark horse coming around the outside. You got Luis Robert of the White Sox, center fielder there at plus 125, and Kyle Lewis of the Mariners at plus 150. Both of these guys have been fantastic year to date. They've both, had MVP conversation at some point, have cooled off since here, but it truly is a two-man race between Kyle Lewis and Luis Robert. And they were tied as of a month ago in regards to odds, but now Robert has taken the slight edge on Lewis. So Lewis was the leader in the clubhouse, but Robert here pushing late. And really ultimately is who you think's going to finish down the stretch. Who is going to go, have that last 2 weeks and have that run, so to speak, because both of these guys, Robert's hitting 265, 11 homers, 27 RBIs, and then you got Lewis out in, let's see here, Seattle. I'm hoping I can find him within the statistics here. I'm on all of Major League Baseball, so I'm trying to manipulate him to see if I can pull him up, but I haven't seen him thus far. Let's see if we check the second page here. Okay. Nope. That's Kyle Seager. Okay. So we'll just move on. But, Kyle Lewis at plus 150, I think is great odds when it comes to the American League, Rookie of the Year. And then you're looking at the National League Rookie of the Year. It is Jake Cronenworth, second baseman of the Padres, who is minus 125. So he is currently your leader. Those odds for him have basically stayed the same. He was minus 20 or 120 a week ago, up from plus 700 2 weeks ago. So Cronenworth has gone from plus 700 to minus 125 over the course of the last couple of weeks. And that's the type of run I'm talking about. So who do you think's going to do it? Robert or Lewis on the American League side to basically make that run and really establish themselves as the leader in the clubhouse? Because on the National League side, Cronenworth certainly has done that for the Padres at second base. And lastly here, wrapping up today's episode, talking about the World Series odds, team odds here, where we currently stand on September 9th. We have the Dodgers at plus 350. The Yankees still second place at plus 460. I certainly wouldn't take that bet right now the way they're playing. The Rays at plus 750 I think is good value. The Athletics at plus 850 potentially. And then in the National League, if you think the Dodgers get upset, whoever you think has the ability to do that, I'd say put some money on those guys, because the Cubbies, Braves, and Padres plus 1,400, 1,400, and 1,600 are good odds. And if they can beat the Dodgers and get to the series, anything can happen. And that would be a great return on investment. $100 betting you back $1,600 if the Padres win the World Series. But of course, you're favored. You got the Dodgers plus 350, the Rays plus 750, the Yankees and Athletics still at the top of the list as well. But that'll wrap it up for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. I thank you guys very much for listening once again. Hopefully you've had a great week out there. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all of those across the board. Leave a 5-star review, write a rating, or, flip those. Write a review, leave a rating. I always mess those up, but we certainly appreciate it. As well as check out social media, both the GSMC Podcast Network and the GSMC Baseball Podcast. But that'll wrap it up for episode 268. I am out until Monday when I talk to you guys again. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.